So I've been working on this project, I think, since I was 17 years old. Back in those days when I was a teenager, I was starting to become aware and interested in experimental music. And I was starting to make my own instruments, and I had nowhere in Albuquerque to rehearse or to practice or to come up with ideas. I was too young to have a studio. Couldn't do it at home, it was too noisy. Mother told us to get out of the house. And so friends and I would go out to the desert with generators, and I would play noise out in the desert. And some of the earliest concerts I ever did were out there on the West Mesa. And eventually I was still curious about improvisation and contemporary music, and I enrolled here at UNM in the music department and studied with Christopher Schultes and Manny Rettinger. And it was through that and my own research that the full spectrum of possibilities came to light, and learning about all of the things that happened in the 20th century with music, John Cage, other composers. But I had to leave Albuquerque. I didn't find the scene of people here that were doing these kinds of things. And so I went to grad school in California. And years after that, I moved back here to Albuquerque. And I started finding more and more people who were interested in the kind of music I was making. And we started putting on concerts all over the city. Same thing, we didn't really have a space to do this in. So we would put on concerts on rooftops across the street, over here in the UNM neighborhood, or under bridges somewhere in town. Or again, we'd go out back to the desert and make noise out there. And so I've been thinking of all these ways of making or prompting musicians to make music throughout my whole career. And that sometimes exists as a score, other times it's just a time and a place to ask each other to improvise. And sometimes it's just me as a solo musician just experimenting. And so last year, the Tamarind Institute across the street asked me if I would be one of their artists in residence to make a print for them. And I was thinking for about 5 minutes what I could do, and I remembered I'd been working on this thing for 30 years to make a score for the entire city of Albuquerque, whether they showed up or not. At least there would be 100 or more musicians that I've collaborated with over the years who I could rope into this. And so that's what this project began as, in that way, is the making of the score of T-Way. That involved researching maps. Here on campus we have a map resource center called MAGIC. And I spent some time there looking at different maps, pre-colonial maps, the conquistadors made maps. There's a lot of different tourist maps of Route 66 and the city. And I started drawing from these maps and combining them into different versions of the way we see our city. And with lithography being a process of layers, the top layer of this is the music, is the graphic notation to prompt people to make sounds all over the city. So this has evolved into a giant project of multiple musicians, a Venn diagram of communities of people, all playing in sequence on a single day here in our city. Yeah.
So how did John Donald Robb factor into this project?
Yeah.
From the archives to anything else?
So John Donald Robb's influence here at the University of New Mexico and in the music community in New Mexico at large is very important. For me, it's that legacy has crossed my path in a few ways. I came to the Composer Symposium, I think I was 11 years old. My piano teacher, Don Chambers, was giving a concert here. I'd been studying with her as a kid for about 3 years and hadn't seen her perform yet. And she told my mother that there's going to be a concert, and we got dressed up and came down. And Dawn comes out on stage, on this stage at Keller Hall, wearing a bathrobe, and walks up to the piano and throws a bunch of rubber duckies in there and slams the lid. And I'm thinking, wow, what is this? What's going on? And after the concert, she's talking to the composer, and she points to my sister and I think there was another kid there, and says, these are my students. This is the composer, John Cage. So that was the year that John Cage came to the Robb Composer Symposium. Now, I'm not going to say that was an influence to me at that time, but I kept hearing that name as a teenager. And that was the only composer I'd ever met, was John Cage. So there was 1 degree or 2 degrees separation. You know, I'd met this guy. This is a living composer. He did pass away soon after that. But it stuck with me that a composer is not an imaginary thing. There's a person making this music, and that could be the music. And then enrolling here in the program, and of course the Composer Symposium is still happening, a very important annual event to those of us who are interested in new music. That symposium would bring guest composers every year and expose those of us who were living here to those people in that music. So that was very important to me, and a lot of those composers that I met back then as a student, I've gotten to know much more throughout the years. And of course, the archival work, the musicological work of Robb, the more I was interested in the music that is of this region, the music of northern New Mexico, where my father's from, some of the archiving of indigenous music that has happened here at the university, all of that has been an interest of mine as I make work here in this place. I try to think about how that has influenced my own music, how my own tribal music or the Hispano music of New Mexico is telling the story of this place. And that's what T-Way is seeking to do as well, is continue talking about that complex history of who we are, who live here.
So I'm just curious about, I can't remember the movement, the one with the cellos. Mm-hmm. So that's an indita, and that indita is in the archives. And I was just curious if you got it from the archives, or if you just had knowledge of it and chose it for this project.
What became, can I talk about the Cobos collection too?
Sure.
The kind of sister or brother, whatever.
Sure, why not?
Well, and so throughout the years, both studying the Robb archives and also the Cobos collection up at Colorado College, became aware of the forms of music and genres of music of New Mexico. And so within T-Way, some of these melodies and songs and corridos are referenced within some of the movements. For instance, in the cello piece, that melody is a mixture of different songs. One of them is the Indita del 1884. And so talking about the flooding that happens from the Rio Grande. In the greeters, there's other songs as well. And I have to think of what those songs, the Venado, the deer one, I have them written down. I could say this again, but let me get the titles. There's
right.
Let me look. Do you have them on you? No?
No, it's in the email where I wrote that down.
Let me say this part again, because I have them written down. Okay. Soy un triste venadito cuando salí de mi país en corrido de Dan Orr Cedillo. Okay. So, should I say that again and reference those?
Sure.
I'll just talk about Soy un triste de venadito.
And tell me where you got them. You got those from the Cobos?
No, those are.
Because those are.
So let me see how I can say this. Those are from the book, the big book, the Hispanic Folk Music of New Mexico and the Southwest, which has all those transcriptions.
Yeah, because I saw, okay. So mention that as you're talking about it.
That's a long title of that book. The Hispanic Folk Music of New Mexico and the Southwest.
Yes.
That's like a big anthology, right?
Yeah.
Hispanic Folk Music of New Mexico and the Southwest. So the treasure we have is the big anthology of the Robb transcriptions, the Folk Music of New Mexico and the Southwest, big book. And so just looking through those scores and looking at different songs that reference having to move, be in motion across the land. There's a few songs in there. One of them, Soy un Venadito, is one of them. And these songs are ending up in one of the movements called the Greeters, which is for two singers on horseback who are singing these different corridos as they travel up the Bosque Trail on horseback. So anytime they encounter somebody on the path, they're going to sing to them as they approach them. And when they are leaving them, then they fade out the song and continue again when they see the next person.
Okay. Well, you've already mentioned the Composer Symposium. I mean, I don't really have much else.
Yeah, and there is another part of Robb's, there is another part of Robb's work that I found out about later in life, and that's the electronic music that he made, which I had no idea about, and had just come upon this, in this day of everything being accessible through digital media and people sharing files and things uploaded, had come upon his music, and I think it was labeled as J.D. Robb, maybe, and put two and two together that this is the John Donald Robb who also made very experimental electronic music, which is another big part of my practice. And so it's just been so cool to see all these different trajectories of his work, and there's definitely an influence on myself and my work.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.